There's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes,
One of the
I am.
wonderful things about being part of community, having found belonging in a community, is that we should and ought to desire to pray for one another. And so I know we have lots of needs in our community. Needs that range from health needs to mental health needs to financial needs, whatever that looks like. Just I invite you to bring those to the forefront of your mind right now. What are the things that you are praying for or have been praying for? And if there's something that you have on your heart right now that you'd like us to pray for, I'm going to invite you to just slip your hand up. Just let us know. Is there something that we can pray for? There's a couple hands around. You mind just keeping them up just for a moment? And if you can take a look around and see whose hands are up, I invite you to make your way to them. And we're going to pray. You may not need to, when you go over, you don't need to necessarily ask what it is. Maybe you're in relationship with them and you already know what's going on. So you can pray a little more specifically into it. But we love these times together, and we believe that God is here, He's present with us, and that He's faithful to bring healing, to comfort and give His peace over the situations. So would you join with me in prayer? God, we come before you today humbly. As we've just sang, we recognize that you are holy, that you are good, that you love us. And Lord, some of us find ourselves in valleys right now where the goodness seems distant. Even though when we take moments like this to reflect and look back, we recognize that you have always been faithful. Even when the answers don't look the way we wanted them to, we see your hand at work. And God, you know each one of these situations that have been expressed today. You know those that are battling with doubt and questions. And you're looking at them right now and you're saying, it's okay. It's okay. I can take it. God, you see the ones that are hurting today physically, who are in pain, and whose pain is leading to fear because they're just not sure what that means for the future. Pain can be so all-encompassing. It can impact every area of our lives. Our ability to be in and pursue relationship with people. Our ability to care and love for those around us well. God, we pray over that pain today. God, we believe that you're a healer. You are our healer, that you can remove that pain. But also that you don't always take it away right away. And we don't understand sometimes, but God, I pray that in the pain and in the challenges, that we would draw near to you, that we would experience your goodness, in those moments when we just feel like we're at the end of our rope. God, you see those that are going through transition right now in jobs, maybe in houses and just life stages. You see each one of them. And it's been encouraging to hear just the unwavering faith of some, just that in the midst of these times that feel like we should be worried, you're experiencing your peace through it, trusting that you will continue to provide, seeing your hand. I thank you for those stories, and that as we exist together, those stories would be shared around and we can be reminded of your faithfulness. God, you see those of us who are maybe feeling a little lost these days, who acknowledge that you're with us, but are just like, what's next? And these seasons can be hard. God, I pray that your Spirit would continue to guide and direct and make us creative as we look ahead to the future. Sometimes we get into this groove of just feeling like, well, I'm supposed to just move into this next season, and this is what this season should look like because this is what everyone does. Whether it's students looking at, high school, college, whatever, or in later stages of life, you see where we're at. And God, I pray that we would look to you for guidance. And that you give us the freedom to mix things up a little bit, if that's what you're calling us into. Whatever it is, God, I pray that it's something that's life-giving, something that's exciting. Something that can lead us into continuing to expand your kingdom. Bring your kingdom to earth in whatever way that looks like. Whatever neighborhood we land in, whatever school we land in. God, our desire is to honor you with our lives. To honor you with our lives, Lord. That's why we're here. To experience your love so we can show it to others. Thank you for moments like these in your presence. Thank you for meeting with us. And I pray that your Spirit would continue to speak to us as we continue today. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," Jesus said, "your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road.
All right, so if I were to ask you what your favorite movie is, what comes to mind for you? Can you think of it? I'm not going to open it up, but just I want you to be thinking about that. I have a couple. First one is probably a movie called Peanut Butter Falcon. Anybody seen that one before? Amazing movie. The second one, if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. The second one that comes to mind, and I actually had forgotten about it. It was brought to my mind recently, called Coda. Has anybody seen Coda before? Yeah. Incredible movie. It's kind of a coming of age comedy. It's one of the first movies that we probably watched together as the family with the girls getting older, where that felt like a grown-up movie that wasn't animated. And it was, the girls got to see me cry. It was awesome. It won a bunch of awards, including Best Picture, and it's about this girl named Ruby, who is the only hearing member in her family. The rest were born without their hearing. And she tries to help her family's struggling fishing business, all the while having this passion to sing. And as you can imagine, she has this passion to sing and a family that just doesn't understand. They don't get it. And her mom, it really upsets her mom. There's a scene where she's kind of trying to describe to her mom in sign language what this passion is that she has. And her mom's upset because she's like, I think you can imagine she's just upset about the fact that she can't engage in this passion with her daughter. Her mom's like, what's the deal? If I was blind, would you want to be a painter? She just couldn't understand. And so the whole movie is about her family trying to understand her passion, which they just don't get. And later there's a few moments where, I'm going to warn you, the tears well up. And in one of them, Ruby's singing in this recital, and her family comes out to support her. And they're sitting there watching everyone enjoying. They're just looking around, watching people, taking it in, watching people smiling and clapping and singing along. And at one point, the music, it cuts out and it's just kind of silence, and you're taking it in from their perspective. And I want to show you that scene right now. As you watch the movie later on that evening, there's a scene where the father really wants to experience the song. And so they're kind of sitting out in the dark, and he asks her to sing it for him one-on-one, just so that he could go to her and feel her neck and feel the vibration of her neck. There's just so many moments in this movie where you're kind of brought into these places, especially as a hearing person, where you get this sliver of a sense of what it would be like to be deaf. And today's story in Mark, which Jason just read for us, is also about somebody who is missing or doesn't have access to one of their major senses. And so I want to try and look at this story with a similar empathetic imagination. So can you help me do that? We're going to do something a little bit different today. I know we've been talking about storytelling and the power that storytelling has for us. So if you can keep a little bit of an open mind over this next 5 to 10 minutes, I'd appreciate it. And we're going to need a little bit of participation on your end. So today's story, as we mentioned, is about a man named Bartimaeus, found in Mark 10. And I want to invite you, if you're comfortable, to close your eyes and listen. You don't have to. I mean, you can go to sleep. I really won't know the difference, but invite you to close your eyes with us for a few moments as we relive this story together. It says that Bartimaeus was blind and he was poor. 2 significant struggles. It doesn't tell us how he became blind. We don't know if he was born that way. We don't know if there was an accident or sickness that led to his blindness. And we don't know how he became poor. His father, Timaeus, is mentioned, but we assume he's not in the picture because Bartimaeus is out begging in the streets. It says that he would sit on the street and beg for money and food. Imagine what that would be like. Sitting on the side of a dirt road in a busy part of town. Lots of noise, lots of foot traffic. Imagine being there in that moment with Bartimaeus. Not being able to see, but having your other senses heightened. What do you smell? Food vendors, the animals. What do you taste? Maybe your mouth is dry, the dust in the air. Maybe stale bread that somebody had thrown your way. What can you touch? Reach out around you. Maybe back. Maybe scrape your hand along the wall and feel the stone. Maybe out to the side and you realize there's someone there sitting right there beside you. Maybe you can even feel the vibrations of the steps of the people walking by or the donkey pulling a cart. I would imagine for someone like Bartimaeus, there wasn't a lot of physical contact unless your hand accidentally touched somebody. And what are you hearing? The sense that you've become dependent on in so many ways. It was probably his best chance of gauging the environment around him. So much noise from people, talking, bartering, catching these moments of people's conversations as they walk on by. Maybe you recognize a couple of the voices. Some of them friendly, some of them not. All sorts of things. What else are you hearing, tasting, touching, and smelling? With your eyes still closed, I'm going to need your help on this next part, but we're going to recreate some crowd noise. So wherever you're at, we're going to need some footsteps. Start tapping your feet on the floor. Some shuffling, some slow, some fast, some heavy, some quiet. And we need some chatter. You start talking to the person beside you about the weather, about the prices of yeast today, about fish or olives or Roman politics. And still listening to the sound of the crowd, there's people selling things. Maybe chickens. Those price of chickens. And at some point, he hears this large crowd of people coming down the street, and he discovers through what he's overhearing that Jesus of Nazareth is here. He's heard stories of his teachings and miracles and his kindness. Could this actually be him? He hears people saying his name. Is that Jesus? Is this Jesus coming? Bartimaeus can feel that Jesus is getting closer, and he builds up the courage to call out. Not just call out. It could be a cry. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. The crowd starts looking at him like, what is with this guy? Shh, be quiet. But he keeps going. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. But amongst all the noise, Jesus hears Bartimaeus. And the desperation in his voice. And he hears something else too. It's faith, Mark says. Bartimaeus isn't just like, hey man, I'm over here, help me out. There's weight to what he's saying. What he's shouting, Son of David. It was the same name the prophets used to speak about the coming Messiah. A Messiah that was going to bring good news to the poor, sight to the blind, and healing to the brokenhearted. And Jesus tells the people around him, call him to me. Which surprises the crowd a little bit, I think. They change their tune. They're like, cheer up. On your feet, he's calling you. Bartimaeus gets up and he starts to make his way toward Jesus. Which way is he? Help me. And they start directing him, and then he's right there in front of Jesus. And the crowd's quiet down. And they're all kind of wondering, what's he going to do? There's a bit of anticipation, and Jesus looks at this man and says, what do you want me to do for you? Bartimaeus says, Rabbi, teacher, I want to see. I want to see. And Jesus says, go, your faith has healed you. And immediately he receives his sight. You can open your eyes. Immediately he receives his sight and follows Jesus along the road. What was that experience like for you? What did you notice being in that place, being in Bartimaeus' world? What stuck out to you as you imagined being in this story? Please feel free to share. I can give you the mic if you'd like. His boldness? Yeah. 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 Yeah, even despite, she said, boldness even when people are telling him to be quiet, stop talking. He still pushed through and was persistent. Isolation. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to give...
About the moment when the hopelessness or the feeling that you must have had after all these years of hopelessness turned to a moment of possibility. You began to think, this
Yeah.
I can call it. So I think there was a turn.
Yeah. Yeah, was that in that moment? Did that process start earlier for him when he started hearing stories about Jesus and the word spreading about what he'd been up to? Anybody else? Pat? Yeah, sorry, I'm going to bring the mic. No one wants a mic. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Anybody else? Jeff?
Yeah, just thinking.
Yeah. 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 In case you didn't hear, he was just commenting on the trust that we have to develop when we lose our senses on our surroundings. Yeah. Anybody else? What was that experience like for you? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Love it. Yeah. It's good. Yeah, he may not have even had anyone tell him directly these stories of Jesus, right? Just listening closely. Yeah. 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 It's good. Yeah. 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 Absolutely. I think one of the parts that stands out to me the most is this question of Jesus. What do you want me to do for you? And it reminded me of one of the questions that came to mind for me last year when we had Uriah speak about disabilities, which was this: I wonder how many people stay away from the church because of the way healing is talked about. The way that healing is talked about makes them feel like something is wrong with them. Or if some parents or relatives stay away from the church because the way this conversation around healing has been handled for so long makes them feel like this person that they love and who is unique and special to them is made to feel as though this person is incomplete and needs to walk or see or whatever it may be in order to be a better person. And so when Jesus comes to this man, it's kind of like giving this man some dignity by saying, what is it I can do for you? Not assuming or believing even that he needs sight to be complete, because that's definitely not what this story is saying. Now I wonder, if you knew Jesus of Nazareth was in the crowd and was coming towards you, what your answer would be to this question specifically would be. What is it you want me to do for you? I wonder what your response would be. Now, the irony in this story, which is written so well by Mark, is that Bartimaeus could already see. Victor McCracken says, it would be a mistake, however, to interpret this text simply as just another healing story. The Bartimaeus story serves as the concluding bookend to a section of Mark's gospel in which blindness serves as a unifying theme. So in order for us to understand where Mark is going with this, we need to take a step out of this specific story and kind of see the big picture. The story of Bartimaeus is in chapter 10, but there's this whole section from chapters 8 to 10 about blindness and seeing. So 2 chapters earlier, in chapter 8, there's this story about Jesus restoring sight to a blind man at Bethsaida. Jesus then confronts spiritual blindness with his closest followers, who either seem unwilling or unable to see the radical ways of God's upside-down kingdom, which, if you haven't heard that term before, is essentially just means that Jesus, when we talk about God's kingdom, is calling us into these ways that are opposite to the world's ways. His closest followers, the disciples, just don't seem to get it. Even though they're with him all the time, they're totally blind to what Jesus is doing. In the middle of chapter 8, Jesus tells them that he will undergo suffering, rejection, and death, talking about his crucifixion. And Peter's like, no, Jesus, you don't have to do that. That's not a good idea. Do not do that. Don't go down that road. And later in chapter 9, Jesus announces to the disciples the same thing, that he's going to be betrayed into the hands of other humans. And they, probably rightly so, are confused and afraid. And then in that same section, chapter 9, the disciples are arguing about which one of them will be the greatest. And in chapter 10, children try coming to Jesus and the disciples shut it down. They actually stopped kids from coming to Jesus. They're not having any of it. They don't want these annoying kids around Jesus bothering them. And Jesus corrects them and says, let them come. For the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. So Mark is building this theme and showing that even within Jesus' inner circle, people aren't exempt from spiritual blindness. And then he does something really cool. Right before the end of the story of Bartimaeus, he tells another contrasting story about James and John, who are two of Jesus' closest followers. And in chapter 10, we have these two stories here. The story of James and John in verses 35 to 45, and then Bartimaeus in 46 to 52. And I'm pretty sure Mark does this intentionally. In both stories, Jesus asks this question, what do you want me to do for you? You maybe heard me use these terms before. In these two stories, we see what are known as glory prayers and mercy prayers. James and John, Jesus says to them, what do you want me to do for you? And they're like, can we sit at your left and right hand in glory? I mean, that seems like a good idea. It means I can be even closer to you and even more important. And surprisingly, Jesus has this super gracious response to them. And in the same breath tells them more about his kingdom. He says, if you want to be the greatest, you have to be the least. You have to serve. And Bartimaeus, on the other hand, his response is mercy. I want to see. Cynthia Jarvis, who is a theologian, says this, though the one answer rests on well-established religious laurels or praise or accolades. The other petition issues from darkness and doubt. The one request would sidestep suffering. The other is forged out of loss, exclusion, and helplessness. The one is bent on an exclusive claim to righteousness. The other is bowed down in need before the Son who is alone and righteous. This story reveals something of the nature of our ministry to both insiders and outsiders. And I couldn't help but think about James and John, who we just heard about in this story before, are just classic bounded set thinkers. And if you've been around BVC, you've heard us talk about bounded and center set, and maybe this is new to you, and that's okay. Bounded set thinking is basically this. It's this thinking of creating a circle and determining who's in and who's out. We draw a boundary. And I get the feeling the disciples aren't too excited sometimes about how inclusive Jesus is. He keeps erasing these boundaries, and they're like, no, let's keep this tight. This feels good. Let's keep this tight. There's 12 of us. And the sad part is we do this in churches too. Churches are notorious for doing this. But the hope is that we would live into more of a centered set way of being, taking away the boundaries and being a community that has a core, has a center instead of boundary lines. And then the question isn't necessarily, are you in or are you out? It's, which way are your feet facing? The question isn't how far or how close are you, it's which direction are you moving in? In this series, we've been asking this question, if Jesus is our center, what kind of center does he create? And I think a good kind of summary for what we've read this morning is this quote by Elia Delio, who says this: Jesus was a whole maker, bringing together those who were divided, separated, or left out of the whole. He initiated a new way of Catholicity, which is this universal inclusiveness, a gathering together of persons in love. And when we look at our culture, it's easy to be fooled thinking, what's the big deal? Our culture is inclusive. We see people loving each other in our culture. But I think what we see more of is that people are just saying, I'm going to love what I want to love. Because even the inclusive side of things still draws lines. Because the inclusive side is still saying, if you don't align with us, then you're not welcome. Am I wrong? That's what I see here in the story of Bartimaeus, that Jesus, through Bartimaeus, is revealing something of the nature of his and hopefully our ministry to outsiders. By definition, an outsider is somebody who doesn't belong. And Jesus calls the outsider, Bartimaeus, in. He sees through the crowd. He sees through the noise and the distractions that would keep him from him. He sees Bartimaeus and erases the boundary line that has been created. Again, Cynthia Jarvis says, think of those for whom faith is matter of life and death rather than social convention. When our ministry is marked by encounters with the blind who want to see, the lame who want to walk, the leper who wants to be cleansed, we catch a glimpse of what it must be to come close to Jesus. For through them, we hear the word he speaks to us now, anew. I'd like to talk about this at our tables for a few moments. 3 questions. What are some of the reasons people become or are viewed as outsiders in our society? Who are the people that would be considered outsiders in our society? And one of the things that I said that stood out to me about this movie, Coda, that we talked about earlier, is that we're brought into these moments, especially as a hearing person, where we get these slivers of a sense of what it's like to be deaf. And so the question that goes along with that thought is, what are the ways we can develop empathy towards these people and pursue wholeness? And pursue wholeness. I don't think I added that last word there, but let's talk about that. Those 3 questions. What are some of the reasons people become or are viewed as outsiders? Who are the people that would be considered outsiders in our culture? And what are ways we can develop empathy towards them and prioritize wholeness? Let's take a few minutes and talk about that at our tables. There's so many different things that keep us from, that keep people on the outside. And so as we've considered this morning what it looks like for us to develop and move towards empathy for these people that we've kind of understood to be outsiders in our society, I'd love for you to think of ways this week of how you can take a step in that direction and actually do it. Who are the people that you maybe considered to be outsiders and why? And what can you do to move towards them? We're going to end with that. But as a way of closing, I want to read with you a prayer to close. And it's going to be one that sounds familiar in some ways. It's a little bit, it has some added commentary by Ronald Rolheiser. And this is the prayer. Our Father, who always stands with the weak, the powerless, the poor, the abandoned, the sick, the aged, the very young, the unborn, and those who, by victim of circumstance, bear the heat of the day. Who art in heaven, where everything will be reversed, where the first will be last and the last will be first, but where all will be well and every manner of being will be well. Hallowed be thy name. May we always acknowledge your holiness, respecting that your ways are not our ways. Your standards are not our standards. May the reverence we give your name pull us out of the narcissism, selfishness, and paranoia that prevents us from seeing the pain of our neighbor. Your kingdom come. Help us to create a world where beyond our own needs and hurts, we will do justice, love tenderly, and walk humbly with you and each other. Your will be done. Open our freedom to let you in so that the complete mutuality that characterizes your life might flow through our veins, and thus the life that we help generate may radiate your equal love for all and your special love for the poor. On earth as in heaven, may the work of our hands, the temples and structures we build in this world reflect the temple and the structure of your glory, so that the joy, graciousness, tenderness, and justice of heaven will show forth within all of our structures here on earth. Give life and love to us and help us see always everything as gift. Help us to know that nothing comes to us by right and that we must give because we have been given to. Help us realize that we must give to the poor, not because they need it, but because our own health depends upon our giving to them. Us, the truly plural us. Give not just to our own, but to everyone, including those who are very different than the narrow us. Give your gifts to all of us equally. This day, not tomorrow. Don't let us push things off into some indefinite future so that we can continue to live justified lives in the face of injustice, because we can use present philosophical, political, economic, logistic, and practical difficulties as an excuse for inactivity. Our daily bread, so that each person in the world may have enough food, enough clean water, enough clean air, adequate health care, and sufficient access to education so as to have the sustenance for a healthy life. Teach us to give from our sustenance and not just from our surplus. And forgive us our trespasses. Forgive us our blindness towards our neighbor, our obsessive self-preoccupation, our racism, our sexism, and our incurable propensity to worry only about ourselves and our own. Forgive us our capacity to watch the evening news, to scroll through Instagram, and do nothing about it. As we forgive those who trespassed against us, help us to forgive those who victimize us. Help us to mellow out in spirit, to not grow bitter with age, to forgive the imperfect parents and systems that wounded, cursed, and ignored us. And do not put us to the test. Do not judge us only by whether we have fed the hungry, given clothing to the naked, visited the sick, or tried to mend the systems that victimize the poor. Spare us this test, for none of us can stand before this gospel scrutiny. Give us, instead, more days to mend our ways, our selfishness, and our systems. But deliver us from evil. That is, from the blindness that lets us continue to participate in anonymous systems within which we need not see who gets less as we get more. Amen. Amen. If in your conversation you realize that there are people groups that you have been viewing as outsiders and you simply just need prayer around that, I invite you to come talk to me, please. If the thing that is keeping you from moving forward to close the gap between you and an outsider is just not knowing what to do or how to handle it, what to say, come and talk to me as well. Probably don't have all the answers, but I hope that I can help connect you with somebody that can help you. It's important for us as a community to be moving towards the margins as a group and in our individual lives as well, as we seek to love Jesus more and spread his love to those around us. So thank you for your conversations today. Thank you for being with us. We hope you have a very restful long weekend next weekend and look forward to having you join us if you're around. If not, we hope that it's a refreshing break as you engage with whatever your family looks like in these days. We love you guys. We hope you have a great week.
Jesus, you're my hope and stay.